This is our third installment of our discussion of Augustine's concept of the city of God. And all I really want to do is give you a chance to think through how this idea would apply. So I'm going to go through 5 case studies. And what I would encourage you to do is to look at these, maybe even keep a score sheet. And on each one, are you going to agree with Augustine's way of doing ethics, or is there some alternative? Are you consistent in all 5? And if you do change, why? As you go through these, I would encourage you, if you need to, stop the video, make yourself choose one. You can always change your mind later. This is what this exploration is for. Choose one, write it down, and then at the end, we'll come back and assess, did we keep this consistent ethic, or did we change, and maybe why? And we'll kind of talk about some of the principles that may have shaped our thinking. Okay, the first case is one that we've talked about. I introduced it in the first video, used it as an example in the second video, and it's just war. Can a Christian shoot to kill? I explained earlier that Augustine really thinks that this is a no-brainer. If someone is coming into your house and you're alone, Jesus says you have to love your enemies. You don't kill. That's your individual ethic. But there is a second ethic, because you're a citizen of the kingdom of earth as well. And so when you're at home and you have children to protect, and an invader is coming to harm them, and your only choice is to shoot to kill, well, then that's the loving thing to do. You see, there's 2 different ethics there. So my question in this case study is, let's say you're a border security guard. You work on the border and you see an invading army or invading marauders trying to come across the border. They're going to kill innocent citizens. Your commanding officer gives you the order, shoot to kill. Can you, as a Christian, do that? Augustine's 2 city ethics would say yes, because you as a Christian individually wouldn't hurt them. You would love your enemies. But you as a citizen of the city of earth have to do this. It's the loving thing to do to protect your fellow citizens. Luther would say something similar. He's heard us saying there's this duty you have. You have to obey your commanding officer because you're a member of the kingdom of earth, as well as a private member of the kingdom of heaven. But then there are others, like the Anabaptists, who would say, no, we're not allowed to shoot to kill. We're Christians. We have this single ethic. Jesus told us to love our enemies, period. So, take out your score sheet, write down case study number 1, just war. Do you agree? Could you as a Christian shoot to kill if you were a border guard? Or, that would be a 2 city ethic. Or do you have a single ethic that says, no, I have to obey Jesus above the laws of humanity, and I could never kill, no matter what it costs me? Well, maybe there are other ways to think about it, but which of these theories would you use? Okay, the second case I'm going to give you is closely related to that first one, because it does involve killing somebody. But what would you say about the death penalty? Would you, as a Christian, be able to work, say, in a prison on death row, and would you be able to implement the death penalty? Because Augustine would say you have this sort of 2 city ethic. You could say that I, as a personal Christian, would love this person. I would never kill this person. But then you might say, as a public worker, I have to follow the laws of the land. That's Luther's sort of 2 kingdom sense of duty. But Augustine would take it even further and say, if it's the loving thing to do, if the laws of society are ordained by God and you're there to protect the people from an axe murderer, well, then it's the loving thing to do to implement the death penalty. I'm from the state of Georgia. They still have the electric chair there. Could you, as a Christian, flip the switch on an electric chair? Or would you have something like an Anabaptist single ethic that says, no, I'm going to not work in such a place because I, as a personal Christian, would never electrocute someone, no matter what they had done. And since I personally wouldn't do it, I can't do it publicly. I would say it's unchristian. Or would you be a social gospel person who takes this single ethic into society and says, I'm going to campaign to change the death penalty laws? Or is there some other ethic you would use? Which of these would you apply? If you keep Okay, for this third case, I'm going to talk about caring for the poor. And it might seem obvious that, yes, we should care for the poor. Jesus taught that. But what about in terms of government's role? You personally would give to anyone in need as a Christian, but do you think the government should be putting in place healthcare and things that would help the poor out? Um, Maybe we could make this real concrete and go back to that case of being a border security guard. What if you're a border security guard and people aren't coming to the border to shoot to kill? They're not invading to harm us. What if they're coming across the border simply to get food and water, shelter, a better standard of living? Now, you as a Christian would say, of course, I would give them hospitality. I would let them in. But you might have an Augustinian two-city ethic that says, but there's limited resources. The only loving thing to do for my citizens and my people and my children is to keep people out and protect our resources. It's the good, loving thing. Or Luther's Two Kingdom would simply say something like, oh, you obey your commander. God put this government in place, and the laws say people can't cross the border illegally. Or do you have some sort of Anabaptist mentality that says, well, because I personally would let the person across the border, I can't work in this job? Or instead of separating, retreating from society, maybe you have a social gospel mentality that says, oh, I'm going to campaign to change the border laws and immigration reform. Which of these ethical systems are you using in this case? Okay, this is where we slightly shift the sort of stakes that are in the game here, but what would you say about the issue of religious liberty? I'm a Baptist, and that's one of the core principles of Baptist history. Would you say that as someone who wants to promote religious liberty because you believe it's the loving thing to do to give other people the right to worship however they want to, would you say that a Christian should give that right to any extent? Sort of an absurd case, but let's try it on. What about you become the city manager, and it's your job to sign off on all the building certificates, and someone in your town wants to build a Satanist church. And this Satanist church, okay, it's not going to harm, it's not going to sacrifice cats or anything, but it's a Satanist church that's going to corrupt our youth and try to lead people away from Jesus. You're the city manager. You could find a way to stop this. Do you say, even though I'm a Christian and I wouldn't want there to be a Satanist church in my town misleading people, do you say as a Christian, that's my private individual ethic, and my job as city manager is to sign the certificate and let them build their church? Or that instead of that two-city ethic, do you say something like a single ethic, maybe as an Anabaptist, separatist way of thinking, I simply couldn't be in that job because I would never sign that certificate. It's the city's job to figure it out. I can't be in that role. Or maybe something more proactive. Maybe the social gospel says, you know what, I'm going to campaign for what's right in laws, and I'm going to campaign to keep Satanist churches from building their church in my city. Maybe even as a single gospel social ethic, you could say something like, I'm the city manager. God put me in this role, and I know it's wrong for them to build Satanist churches. I'm not going to let them build a Satanist church because of that single ethic that you're trying to implement. Well, how does this compare to your view on the other issues? I mean, if you had to choose, in this case of religious freedom, put it on your score sheet, what did you choose? Okay, maybe the most controversial one yet, certainly one of the most debated recently. What do you think about the institution of marriage? And I'm going to ask that just for the sake of argument for this debate, that we set aside people who think that same-sex marriage could be a biblically approved, sound Christian marriage. Let's set aside that debate and just say, for the sake of argument, that we're going to go with what is a traditional view of marriage and say that a husband, and the marriage is for a husband and one wife. And when we go with that traditional Christian view of marriage, let's take this case study. Let's imagine that you're a justice, you're a judge in court, and a same-sex couple comes to you and wants you to marry them. Now, legally, the laws say you're supposed to. And you personally, as a Christian, might say, I think this is an unchristian marriage. Do you apply a two-city ethic, a two-kingdom ethic that says the laws of the land are ordained by God? Do you apply a two-city ethic that says the loving thing to do is to give people the freedom that I would want? Or even though you personally, individually, wouldn't perform this marriage ceremony, say if you were a minister in your own church, but you have this two-city ethic that says I have to do it publicly. Is there something like that going on? Or do you have some other single ethic? Do you say, well, because of this, I'm going to have to be like the Anabaptists and retreat from society. I couldn't perform this marriage for my own conscience, so I can't be in this job as a judge who performs marriages. Or do you say, I'm going to fight to change the laws? And as a single ethic, sort of like that social gospel, Caesar has given me the vote. Maybe I should go and campaign to change the laws to say that this is an illegal marriage. And that way it wouldn't have to be that tension between Christian and public debate. Or is there some other ethical system that you're using? Now, remember, I asked you to keep your score. Stop and write down which would you agree with in this case. And now, how did that compare to others? Did you ever switch any of your principles? Did you switch from a two-city ethic or two-kingdom ethic to a single ethic or vice versa? And if so, why? I'm not trying to set up these debates just for the sake of debate. I want us to see what principles are we using? When are we being Augustinian? And when are we deviating from that view? And why? What's at stake? Okay, we got into some pretty controversial material today. How'd you do on your score sheet? Were you consistent on all five? Did you change from a two-city ethic to a single ethic at some point? Um, let's acknowledge good, honest, well-meaning Christians disagree about these issues. And we want to honor people who are trying to do their best to follow their conscience, to understand God's will for the Christian and for the church in this world. But I hope you'll try to look and see what principles were there that made you switch from one to another. Are we simply being inconsistent? Or is Augustine's model of two cities maybe not really applicable in all cases? Whatever the reasons are, I hope you'll think deeply about these things. This is an influential theory that has shaped a lot of our Western society, a lot of the world today. And so as we continue to try to understand what we can learn from people like Augustine and from these early Christians, I do think that they have a lot to teach us about how we live our Christian lives. And the question is, how are we going to accommodate their teachings and how are we going to apply them today?